record is called Warp and Weft. Warp and Weft are the two components of a weaving, so the vertical and the horizontal threads. And my mom's a weaver, and she taught me that when I was a little kid, and I thought about it before for a record title, but it never really fit. But this time it did, because I was, quote unquote, weaving in some lyrics from old folk songs like Say Darlin' Say and Motherless Children, as well as references to other artists, which I've done before, but in this record there's a couple songs that are really specifically talking about other artists. So Howard Finster's one of them, who was a crazy old folk artist guy in Alabama and Georgia, and then also Alice Coltrane, who was a really great jazz harpist. And so the weaving theme worked for me on multiple levels, and even on certain tracks you can hear multiple people being woven in and out. Like there's a song called White Cherry that's more of a jazz type song that I've ever written. I mean, it's actually referencing Alice Coltrane's Journey to Satchitananda. I think that's how you say it. Is that right?
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful song, this really crazy jazz harp song. But we got two different drummers to play on it. Steve Nister and Brian Blade are drumming on this track. So they're being woven throughout the record. And there's a lot of different players that came and went. And the core band was Carl Blau, who lives in Anacortes, and he's been on almost all my records, playing bass and singing and other things too. There's a cool bit of footage of him dropping keys. I didn't even know that was a thing you could do, but he collected all these keys at a thrift shop and started dropping them on the ground in there on the cement part of the ground, and it sounded so beautiful with Icaria. I think it's on Icaria, right? Mm-hmm. This one instrumental track. So Carl Blau is one of the main players, and Carl Bramel from My Morning Jacket. He's a great guitar player, and he also plays sax and pedal steel on the record. And then Tucker did a lot of the drumming, and then we also had Steve Nister drumming. He's a Portland guy, and myself playing a lot of electric guitar on this record more than in the past. So it's definitely more of a lush band record than the last adult record I made, July Flame, which was certainly more acoustic and sparse and pared back.
We recorded the record at Flora Recording and Playback in its most recent incarnation, which is finally the first time it's been out of a home, and the first time we've recorded one of Laura's records outside of a home. So I think for us, having a 3-year-old and soon to be a second child, it was really nice to have a place where we went to work and we focused on that and weren't being pulled by parental duties so much, though it required mostly working kind of office hours while we had childcare. But I think it really just helped us get in here and focus. I don't really know how to say how the studio factored in.
Well, this is a big, nice studio that we built for Tucker to work outside our house. And it's, I don't know how many square feet, 1,200 square feet?
1,600.
Yeah, and so it, to me, felt like a really great step up. I mean, I've always only been in basements, never made a record in a real studio. And it was just, we have Michael who was assisting, and just people coming and going from the airport, and just a lot of logistics, and to have a space to go and work and get, concentrated stuff done and not feel so fractured, because the parenting thing can definitely fracture your life. Like, we got to run over here, pick up that person. So it just made it easy to have concentrated time focusing on making music. And my parents were also helpful. They watched our son for about 7 days. And we worked long hours those days so we could really bang out the band tracks. And a lot of the stuff was tracked live, and then we had various guests coming and going to do overdubs. But for me, it was thrilling to have a space outside of the house that's dedicated to making music, that is Tucker's place, that he's totally dialed in. And it's a professional place, but it feels old. And there's a lot of salvaged wood and salvaged siding and just cool artifacts basically from old Portland buildings that his friend built into this space, which was essentially a raw space. Was it 2 years ago? There's nothing in here.
Yeah.
So for me, it was totally exciting to have a dedicated place to make music, make a record. How do we balance parenting and family life with making music? It's not always easy. It's definitely sometimes I feel stretched too thin in too many directions, or like I'm not being a good enough mom or not being concentrated enough of a musician, but mostly I feel like we've dialed in a pretty good balance of spending time with our son. You know, I work most of the year, I work about half time. When by work, I mean I'm working on writing songs and helping Chad run my label, and then Tucker works full time and tries to kind of keep regular hours as much as he can so that he can spend time with us. There are certainly projects that go way over and it sort of stresses our schedule, but to us it's so fun to have music such a huge part of our lives and our son's life. I mean, I was just talking with Tucker the other day about our son and how he's 3 and just noticing so much about how music works and pointing out different instruments and tracks and loving to play the drums and obsessing about My Morning Jacket. He loves Patrick from that band, the drummer, and
Jim Jame.
And Jim Jame. He leaves the S off. But it's just neat to see how much of a part of the fabric of our life that it is for him. He thinks everybody plays music. And he thinks everybody's a great singer and everybody writes songs. And I mean, Tucker's dad's a professional songwriter, and so it's in the blood. I'm not saying he will become a musician, but it's nice to know that he's growing up in an environment where it's just there. It's like Africa or something, like everybody plays and it's always around. And especially with Tucker as an influence more than me. I mean, if I have my way, I'll just have silence half the day because I have too much music going on in my own head or in the house all the time. But Tucker's always putting on new stuff and explaining it to Tennessee, is our son's name, and they're talking about, well, who played that, and oh, do you hear they're playing with brushes now, and just the details of music. It's very exciting to see him picking up on that and really seeing that as like a part of how we live. So to me, there are stresses for sure with the scheduling of it all, and for me also, I felt that it was really hard to get a bunch of good songs for this record. But that's always the case. But I did feel that because I was pulled in so many directions and sleep deprived for about a year after my son was born, I really didn't come up with the good songs as quickly as I would have liked. And so maybe it's just going to take longer than it used to for me, but I do feel proud of these songs and that they reflect kind of the deepening of my life experience that's happened since I've become a parent, which is related to like a kind of more widening sense of the world. Like, things are heavier in a way when you have a kid because things could go wrong and it feels so scary, but also they're brighter and more intense and beautiful too. And a lot of that sort of dark and light is explored, and I explored that in the record, in the lyrics.
I think it's important when you're in the middle of the creative process, say writing a song, to be able to suspend that judgmental voice that's always trying to say, is this great? Is this bad? Is this, oh, that's terrible. Oh, that's amazing. Or, I don't really think that's the most useful voice to have during the process. And I think Laura's really good about just turning that off and just seeing it through. Getting an idea and seeing it through and suspending judgment about ultimately whether or not it's, the best song she's written in a long time or the worst song she's written in a long time. And I think knowing that she can share them with me when she's ready and that she can trust me as a sounding board helps in her, ability to just make some piles of songs and don't worry about the judging of them yet. Just finish them, because I think so many people don't finish anything because partway through the doubt creeps in, and that's really common, and I'm familiar with that. But she's great at finishing them. And then if you only have, say, 10 songs, and you feel like, oh, that was just so hard to write those 10 songs. I guess these 10 songs are my record. That's fine, and that can work great, but it's really different when you suddenly have 20 songs. You see how a handful of them, anywhere from 2 to 5 to 8 of them, really stand out above the other ones. But if you didn't have something to compare them to, you wouldn't know that. So that's why the process of Laura writing an abundance of songs has been so valuable, because it really helps us figure out which ones are special, and then you start to see little themes emerging. And she's pretty prolific. She can write a song fairly quickly, because I think she's able to turn off that voice that starts to get in the middle of the process, starts to judge it. But you have to use those muscles a lot. I feel like the songwriting muscles and get them really, strong. And then usually there reaches a point after she's been writing for a while that the ratio of good songs gets higher and the bar seems to get higher. It's just fascinating. And ever since we discovered that process, it's hard to not, lean on that somewhat. Because I think that, and Laura, tell me if you don't agree with this, but I think it's easier to find songs, maybe, one or two on earlier records that in hindsight we're like, I'm not sure, maybe we could have done better than that if we had had more time. But we don't feel that way about July Flame, for example, which was the first record where we really did this. Because before that, Laura had made her own rule that every year and a half she would make a record. And at a certain point, after you've made 6 or 7 records, I think it becomes more important to find something new to say and a new way of doing things, but that still feels like it honors where you've come from and what your strengths are, but feels like you're moving forward. And it gets harder and harder to do. You've talked about a lot of the things that are really important to you, and you've got to find new things or new ways to talk about them. I mean, they say you've got your whole life to write your first record, and then a year or two to write every record after that.
I probably wrote 60 songs, and other songwriters are always like, dude, what? How is that possible? I'm like, well, they're really not good, but I believe in them in the moment, so I finish them. I'm like a compulsive finisher. I love finishing things. And so it just makes me feel satisfied. And then I can tell pretty quickly, like, totally missed the mark. Oh well, try again, grab some of those lyrics or recycle that melody. So it's not like they're all 100% 60 songs from scratch, but the recycling process is actually very helpful. Because I can tell, and especially with Tucker's feedback, like, yeah, that's a really cool melody. Let's try that again next time. Change the words, they're kind of hokey or whatever. I have other friends songwriter friends that are like, spend a long time crafting each song, and then they make a beautiful record of 10 songs, and that's their 10 songs. And I sometimes kind of wish that I could do that too instead, because it seems more efficient or something, but maybe in the end, it's not a comparison game. It's just a very different thing. Mine's sort of like I write them in like 20 minutes or an hour, sometimes 2 hours. And I don't spend much time overdubbing. I used to, but then I realized I was polishing turds by adding like hundreds of vocals to a track that wasn't worth keeping. It's kind of a time waster. So luckily my GarageBand broke, which is so strange because it's a digital thing, but I can only make 3 and sometimes on a lucky day 4 tracks with my GarageBand work. And so that forces me, and it's a wonderful limitation given the sort of like so many choices in this world of in general, but specifically with recording, it can be overwhelming. Like how do you decide? In this case, you only have 3 tracks, which is harkening back to the days in like the late 90s when I first started making demos of my songs on the 4-track. It was great. You only have 4 tracks. If you got fancy, you could bounce tracks, but I didn't want to get fancy. I'm not a recordist. I never was interested in being a recordist. So this has been a great limitation. I'm not going to fix my GarageBand because you can just tell, like, that's working or that is not working. Like, this song is at its heart going to work, because I can hear that with a vocal, a guitar, and a harmony. And if it's not going to work, don't keep pushing it. So I'm glad that my garage band is broken. The lyrical content is very much, like I said before, stark, like you said, gratitude and joy and hope and championing, and a lot of the really bright, happy, sort of excited elements of life are in there. And also there's this sort of awareness of the dark side coming in for me that I think comes from being a mother and realizing what it means to lose people on this earth. You get the sense of what it is to bring someone onto this earth, and then along with that comes the fear of losing that person or losing people that you love, and it's amplified. Fear is amplified through becoming a mother, and so I explore that. I look at, there's songs about gun violence, and it's a distressing thing, in our country, and war in general. It's not good for people. It's not good for children, and it's looking at some of these very intense, troublesome things that humans do, as well as these sort of like the sun song. It's like so grateful that we have this beautiful sun that warms up the earth every spring and helps us to live this really magnificent life. And so there's like a lot of reverence on this record, but there's also respect for life and death, and the fine line that there is between the two. So it's heavy. It's kind of heavy, but I also think it's really bright. And I love how there's songs like White Cherry where I'm looking at fascination with the abundance of life, but it's set in this sort of dark tone. I love when you have really kind of upbeat lyrics with minor or dark chords, and vice versa. I think that's a really cool juxtaposition that people can play around with in music. And as far as the diversity of the music goes, I mean, a lot of the songs are at their core incredibly simple structurally, like Sadako Folding Cranes is 2 or 3 chords, Dorothy of the Island is 2 or 3 chords, but then when we get, Tucker's take on it and the other players, it just turns into something bigger, and it's just so magical for me to watch it unfold. I have very strong opinions about lyrics and structure, but once it comes to instrumentation, I'm a little bit easygoing, so I kind of watch people do their thing, and it's just been so cool to see it come together, and so I went into this album with that in mind, like, let's make more of a band record. I think it's fun, and I'm ready to go out on tour with a full band again and bring a drummer, and I haven't done that for like 5 years. Because it's expensive, frankly. I mean, it's really hard to make money on the road when you bring a full band, but at this point, I'm able to basically give myself a little bit of tour support and pay people okay to take out a full band on the road for short tours, because I want to. I think it sounds good to have a full band, and I think that this record deserves that kind of treatment.
Feels like a really interesting, fertile time in our musical lives, because I've had the great honor of getting to work on Nico Case's new record that was just finished. And right as Nico's record was being finished, we were to start Laura's record. In fact, Nico's record went a little over, so they pretty much just flat out overlapped. And throughout that process, it just naturally came up, like, well, hey, maybe Nico should be on Laura's record too. And Nico expressed enthusiasm about that idea before we even mentioned it, and so we made it happen. And it's just really cool to feel like Nico and Katie Lang had become friends, and then we got to know Katie Lang after they had become friends, but Nico had told them that she should get in touch with us and blah blah blah, and it just seems like there's all these layers of or so few degrees of separation.
So we had some old pals and also some new guests, and Nico Case was one of the new ones. And that was really fun because she had just been making a record with Tucker, and she was excited to sing on a couple tracks, which, I was thrilled about because she's such an incredible singer and such a great artist. So that was really neat to have her come in, and she's just really funny and fun to be around. And the same with Katie Lang, who recently moved to Portland. She and Nico had become friends, and I had met Katie at a show recently, and we just kind of out of the blue called her up, and she said she'd love to come over. She biked over on her bike and just sang on a track, and it's not like the most featured Katie Lang vocal of all time, but it's really neat to have her on there and to be making friends with her, and some other bigger names like Jim James are on there, as well as people that maybe other folks have never heard of. Like there's a awesome cello player named Nathaniel Smith on there, and he lives in Nashville, and he's a young guy. He's like, is he 19 or 20? And there's people coming in and out who maybe other people haven't heard of, but it's like a really neat range of different talented people, some of whom recorded from afar, but most of whom came through the studio. We've had sort of a basic foundation of like Tucker, Carl Blau, myself, in the past Avon Kang, this great viola player, and then we just sort of bring in different folks and change it up each time. So I like that feeling that each record's changing and growing and reflecting our community as it is right now. And the community in Portland is really rich with all kinds of great musicians right now.
Brian Blade is probably my favorite musical entity of all time, and he was living in Portland until just last week. But unbeknownst to me, he had plans to move back to Shreveport, where he's from, to be closer to his family and his wife's family. But we were able to get him in for a day to play on 2 songs, one of which we were really struggling with, the song 10 Bridges. We were struggling really finding the right angle for it, and we were starting to wonder if it was going to make it onto the record. But as soon as Brian started playing to it, we knew it was saved, and Laura got really excited about the song again.
I had it in the trash can. He pulled it right out.
So Brian just he's such an amazing listener and player and feel. He brings things out of your song, he brings them to light, that things you had either not ever noticed yet or had forgotten about, not through his words but just through his playing, and through the tones and his feel and the spaces that he chooses to leave. And he really highlights what's special about a song. So I feel like we got a lot more than just a great drummer. We got some illumination on the song and what its strengths are and what it wanted to be.
And it was neat because I feel like all the people that we asked to come in are real, almost like servants of music. And one of them said that, like Katie Lang was like, well, as long as it serves the song. She didn't care what we chose from what she did. She just wanted to serve the song. And I think that everyone that we're interested in musically does that. They set their egos aside and really help bring this song to life and help it have its own entity and be fulfill itself. It's a really cool process to watch. We had Rob Berger in, who's a great piano player who recently moved to town, plays accordion and keyboards and everything. And he just listens one time through, takes a couple notes, and then first take gets it. It's really awesome to watch someone have mastery of their instrument like that.
I think Carl Bramel is a huge part of this record. Well, for one, he brings so much energy to a live performance. I think anybody playing with him when a take's going down, you look up and you see Carl, and if you even were starting to slip out of the moment for a second, you're right back in it because he's there to play it right now. And I feel like he kind of raises the game of everyone around him. And we wanted to have a real electric guitar player play on a handful of these songs. I mean, Laura's an amazing guitar player and plays the acoustic and electric guitar beautifully. She's never really been in the lead guitar role, and Carl Bramel spends majority of his professional musical life in that role. And we were excited to have somebody like that for a handful of songs, and I think we're really thrilled with that decision. And he just seems to get Laura's music and always bring out the right thing in it. And a few times also was really encouraging of Laura's guitar ideas, which had been in the demos. He's as quick as anyone to recognize when somebody's particular style and point of view is just part of the DNA of a song, and you can't necessarily just bring in a hot shot to play that better, That just ties back into Laura talking about how these folks really didn't bring any ego into the sessions. They were all fans of Laura's music and her recordings from the past, and were excited to be part of the next step. And we were excited to bring in some new people just to make sure that we are taking a step forward and challenging ourselves and finding ourselves in some new musical territory, for us to respond to and for us to get excited about, and just to ensure that we don't ever get too comfortable. We love July Flame. And it's good to sort of take notes of some things that have worked for you in the past creatively, but it's really important not to just try to recreate that formula, because part of what was special about that record and any other record is that you were doing something that felt right in that moment.
Yeah, and Tim Young came up from LA. He's a great guitar player. He's been playing with me on tour for a few years and just nailed it. Just so fast, and not that being quick is the best thing in the world, but he is. He's very tasteful and he's very quick, and he gets his point across, and he's, playing different instruments, slide and piano and electric guitar, and 4 hours later you've got 8 new awesome things to put on there. And same for Alex Guy, who's a woman in Seattle that's been playing with me on tour for quite a long time, and a new string arranger, Jeremy Kittle, who lives in New York, who did some gorgeous strings. Got Nate in from the Decembers, who played on the last record we made, the kids record, Tumblebee, and the list goes on and on. It was just really fun collaboration.
Bo Coster also came in. He plays with My Morning Jacket, keyboard player, another amazing musician, and just kind of a keyboard visionary of sorts. He played the omnichord, which is, well, actually, for purists that are going to call me out on it, it's the Q chord, which is the most recent version of the omnichord, which is an electronic kind of auto harp type of item that doesn't sound anything like an auto harp, but it sounds really cool. Bo came in for a day and added so many valuable things to a lot of songs. We had 2 great keyboard players. Kind of thought of Rob Berger as our just utility man, just gonna lay down piano parts and organ parts and kind of Wurlitzer if needed, just the classic old school keys, and planned to lean on Bo heavier for weird synthy sounds and just strange otherworldly noises. And Rob and Bo each ended up dipping into the other's territory a little bit as well, but I think it was really nice to have a little bit of each.
What happened to her spirit? Is it still in the ground? I can hear it. And I'd spin it back, living in jukebox, so come back.
I feel like we did take a voyage on this record. Like, we wanted to go somewhere new, and it's pretty magical. Like, maybe it's just because I'm deep in it right now, but it feels to me like there are certain times where I'll hear a part and I'll be like, that's even better than I imagined it. Like, they got it more than I got it. Like, when I wrote it, it was just a shell of an idea, and now it's fleshed out even more beautifully than I imagined, and that's really satisfying as an artist. I mean, I spend years writing these songs, and this is my time to get to see them come to life. It's really so exciting, and I don't usually listen to my records once they're done, but at this stage I love listening to it, and hearing the different parts and realizing like, wow, this is really so cool to see this little thing came out of nowhere. Just an acoustic guitar or electric guitar part and some vocals, and now look at this. It's this whole world that people can go into. And it's really cool. It's fun to make records. Well, I'm a week away from having a baby, so that's a big part of it too. It's like time pressure. Like, we got to get this thing done, and I don't think we'll totally get it done before the baby comes, but there's a chance. But
we want the baby to have a little say in how things get mixed.
Bring the baby down from mixing.
Talk about a fresh perspective on things.
So that put a little pressure on us, like time-wise and energy-wise. I won't certainly have the energy to be devoting these kinds of hours and this kind of creative oomph to a record after I have a newborn. And I recognize that as a second-time parent, that this is my time to get this work done. And so we did try to time it as best we could. And of course, it's all a moving target, creating anything, humans or records. But it was challenging sometimes for me to have the energy to keep doing it. But, most days I did figure out how to get a nap in, and it's been pretty good. In fact, it's been fun for me to have something else to think about rather than obsess about pregnancy. And also cool to imagine this new person who's about to come out hearing all this music for so much of its life in utero, as Tennessee, our first boy, did with July Flame.
First boy. Does that mean you know something about this one?
I mean, you never know. We'll find out in about a week.